Apple announced the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max with some exciting video upgrades. In this video, folks, I'll break down what's new, compare it to the iPhone 16 Pro Max, show you how I shot that sequence at the beginning of this video using ProRes RAW OpenGate. I'll also include the behind the scenes and the editing process inside Final Cut Pro. Now, if you want to skip ahead or revisit a specific section, you'll find timestamps below. A quick thanks to today's sponsor, Motion Array. More to them later. First, let's look at the new upgrades on the iPhone 17 Pro Max. Starting with the size and weight, the iPhone 17 Pro Max weighs 243 grams, while the iPhone 16 Pro Max is 241 grams, a 2-gram difference. Both phones feel very similar in hand with nearly the same height and thickness. A heavier phone might feel a bit cumbersome once you add a case and accessories like a VND filter, and that extra weight can push the limits of some gimbals. Most foldable gimbals like the Insta360 Flow 2 Pro handle up to 300 grams. And I did use that gimbal during the shoot and it worked really well. But if your setup goes beyond that, it's better to use a higher payload gimbal such as the Hohem iSteady M7. I went with the Pro Max because I like the larger screen and it also has better battery life, plus the extra weight actually helps me get steadier shots when shooting handheld. Starting with the camera system, the telephoto lens is now 48 megapixel, up from the 12 megapixel telephoto on the iPhone 16 Pro models, and it has a larger sensor for better image quality and low light performance. Now you get up to 4 times optical zoom, which gives an equivalent of 100mm focal length without quality loss. It also supports 8 times zoom, about 200mm equivalent. I like the longer focal length for the natural compression and subject separation. It is great for portrait video and landscape, or when filming subjects you cannot physically get closer to. The benefit of this extended reach is that I don't necessarily need to buy a telephoto conversion lens, which by the way takes time to set up and adds bulk. The telephoto also uses sensor shift optical image stabilization for stabilizing handheld shots. There's also a 40x digital zoom, but I wouldn't recommend it since quality drops the further you push in. All 3 cameras are 48 megapixel, but the sensor size are different, unfortunately. It would be great if they just made all sensors the same size, as this would simplify shooting and deliver more consistent image quality. Anyway, the main 1x 24mm lens still has the largest sensor and the lowest aperture at f1.8, which means it's the best for low light and overall gives you the highest image quality out of the 3. The front-facing camera is now 18 megapixel at f1.8, up from the 12 megapixel at f1.9 on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. The sensor is larger and is a square, so it can fit more into the frame and choose landscape or portrait without rotating your phone. Stabilization is improved for video, and the best part is dual capture video, letting you record with the front and rear camera at the same time to capture the scene and your reaction. The Double Take app has supported multicam, but it requires a subscription, so it's nice to see that the native camera app supports it. I would love to see the Blackmagic camera add this so I could record multiple focal lengths at once for more flexibility in the edit. Overall, I'm glad Apple focused on the front camera. With the image quality boost over the iPhone 16 Pro Max, more creators might rely on the selfie camera for vlogging. The new aluminum frame and vapor chamber cooling improves thermal, so it will not overheat as easily. You might know the pain where the screen dims and video apps get super laggy. The new A19 Pro chip brings faster processing, which helps when recording in demanding settings and when editing on the phone. Battery life is improved, and faster charging to 50% in around 20 minutes is handy if you need a quick top-up. The iPhone 17 Pro Max offers 3000 nits of peak brightness compared to 2000 nits on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. It makes it much easier to see what you're filming when shooting in bright sunlight. Apple added ProRes RAW recording to the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max, supported in both Apple's Final Cut Camera 2.0 and the Blackmagic Camera App 3.0. ProRes RAW captures unprocessed sensor data, giving you much more flexibility when color grading and making it easier to match footage with other cameras. In Final Cut Pro, you can even adjust settings like exposure, color temperature, tint, and demosaicing without any quality loss. And ProRes RAW is also supported in DaVinci Resolve. One of the main advantages of shooting in ProRes RAW is the flexibility it gives you in post. For example, if you accidentally record with the wrong white balance, you can easily adjust it in the RAW settings with little to no quality loss. With H.265, on the other hand, corrections like that are much harder, if not impossible, because the image data is already baked in. Now keep in mind that ProRes RAW can only be recorded externally, so you'll need a fast SSD such as the Lexar Professional Go portable SSD, which I've tested and found reliable. Now on top of that, Apple Log 2 is also supported, offering better dynamic range and color depth for grading. Now Final Cut Camera 2.0 and the Blackmagic Camera app support OpenGate recording, though it's not available in all codecs and color profiles. And OpenGate uses the full 4:3 sensor to capture a wide field of view of 4.2K resolution, giving you more flexibility for reframing and adapting content to different social media platforms. The downside is that stabilization isn't supported when filming in ProRes RAW, so depending on the focal length, you'll want to use a tripod or a gimbal. However, with the 1x lens, you can often get away with post-stabilization if you've got steady hands. Also, when filming in OpenGate, you can only use the 13, 24, and 100mm focal lengths. Another new feature is Genlock support, which lets you sync the iPhone with external cameras or devices so every frame stays perfectly in line. This is a pro feature designed for multi-camera productions. Blackmagic also released the Camera Pro dock, which works with Final Cut Camera 2.0 and transforms the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max into a professional cinema setup. With Final Cut Pro 2.0, you also get advanced timecode options like time of day, record run, or even external timecode, giving filmmakers full control for professional workflow. Now that we've covered the main updates on the iPhone 17 Pro Max, let's move on to how I shot the video sequence you saw earlier. Now for this, I used the Blackmagic Camera app instead of the Final Cut Camera app, since it's more advanced and gives me more tools and settings to work with. Now inside the Blackmagic Camera app, under the record settings, I've set the codec to Apple ProRes RAW. And this format keeps more data from the sensor, so you have much more flexibility editing. For the resolution, I use OpenGate, which takes advantage of the full sensor and captures the most detail. For color space, I choose Apple Log 2 as it records more dynamic range and keeps detail in both shadows and highlights when grading. It also turns off dynamic tone mapping, reduces over sharpening, and gives the image a more natural look. I set the If Media Drop Frame option to Alert, which warns you if your iPhone can't record smoothly. Now drop frames can happen if the phone overheats, the battery is low, you're recording at a higher setting, or if storage is too slow or almost full. This way you'll catch any issues right away instead of noticing them later. Under camera, I also enable lock white balance on record. This means as soon as I start recording, the white balance locks in place, which helps keep colors consistent throughout the shot. I also use shutter angle instead of shutter speed. This doesn't really matter that much anymore, because also with shutter as your measurement, when locking it, it will still adapt as you change your frame rate. So for example, you set it to 1/50 and you change your frame rate to 50 frames per second, it will change your shutter speed to 1/100 of a second. Now by following the 180-degree shutter rule, it will give you a natural looking motion blur. And this blur brings the footage closer to how we actually see movements with our own eyes. And it's really a big part of that cinematic look. Another important step is setting the reference source. By default, it's set to none, but I recommend changing it to the internal. Now phones usually record with a variable frame rate to save space and boost performance, but that can lead to audio sync problems in editing. Switching to a constant frame rate locks the frames per second, so playback is smoother and editing is more reliable. So for example, if I set it to 25 frames per second, I get a consistent 25 frames per second instead of one that fluctuates. Regarding audio, I use the built-in microphone and record in stereo to capture ambient sound naturally. Now for storage, if you plan on filming a lot of footage, I save my clips to an external SSD. It keeps everything organized and makes transferring footage to my computer fast and easy. For ProRes RAW, you'll need to record externally anyway, and the Lexar Professional Go portable SSD has been very reliable. I'll cover it more in the accessories section. I have also set my own function button for quick access. F1 is false color to check exposure, more to that later. F2 is focus assist to make sure the subject is sharp, and F3 switches to 50 frames per second for slow motion. I also enable a Rec 709 neutral LUT since Apple Log 2 is a flat profile. It can be hard to judge the exposure and color on the screen. With the LUT on, I see a more natural image while still keeping all the flexibility of log in the recording. For frame rate, I use 25 frames per second, 24 if you're in the US. This way we get a real-time motion, 50 frames per second or 60 if you're in the US for smooth slow motion. Now also be sure to lock your 180 180-degree shutter, which keeps motion natural and prevents exposure shifts. By locking the shutter, tapping on the screen only affects focus. I usually keep focus on auto, but if I need to lock it, I can just tap and hold until it shows lock. This way the focus won't shift during recording. When using the 24mm lens, you'll technically get the most dynamic range at ISO 1600. That means the camera can capture a wider range of shadows and highlights. The trade-off though is that the image will look noisier. I just kept the ISO at the lowest setting to get the cleanest possible image with less noise. Now for stabilization, there is none when filming in ProRes RAW, so I mainly rely on a tripod for still shots or gimbal for camera movements. Finally, I enable grid lines with the rule of thirds and the leveler to help with framing and straight horizons. Once all of this is set, I save it as a preset so I can quickly load these settings every time I shoot. So let's now move over to the gear that I'm using. Now the case I'm using is from Freewell. It not only protects my iPhone from drops and scratches, but also makes filming more flexible. It has a nice magnetic filter attachment, also a 17mm lens mount for adding conversion lenses, and it's also fully MagSafe compatible. You also have full access to ports and buttons, so there's no compromise on usability. Now with the case, I can snap on Freewell's V&D filter, which is essential for following the 180-degree shutter rule and getting smooth cinematic motion blur. And for the sequence I shot, I used the Pro Filter Kit, which includes an adjustable V&D from 1 to 5 stops. Now this right here is not the same. This is a 1 to 5 stop V&D CPL, but with the other one, the Pro Filter Kit, I can insert an ND32, which extends the range to 10 stops, giving me full control even in bright daylight. By simply twisting the V&D filter, I can block the right amount of light to keep my shots properly exposed. It also comes with a CPL filter, which helps reduce reflections. I use the exposure tool called False Color, which overlays colors on your preview to show different exposure levels. Blue indicates shadows that are close to losing detail, while purple means shadow details is already lost. Green usually marks correct middle gray exposure, around 18% gray. Pink highlights ideal skin tones, especially lighter skin. Yellow warns the highlights are close to clipping, and red shows that highlights are fully overexposed, meaning information is lost. To expose skin tones correctly, I first lower the ISO to its minimum. If it's still overexposed, I add the V&D filter. In this case, the V&D was a bit too strong, so I raised the ISO to place my skin tone in the pink area while keeping them out of the red zone where detail is lost. I use the Lexar Professional Go portable SSD, available in 1TB or 2TB. For most people, 1TB is plenty, and it's super small and portable. With a 180-degree angled male to female adapter, the setup stays cable free. I also recommend the hub version since it adds extra ports for accessories, so you can plug in a wireless mic or even charge your iPhone while filming. Recording directly to an SSD makes file transfers so much easier, as it works like a regular external drive. Transferring from the iPhone to a Mac is slower, and you also can't really see individual clips from the Blackmagic camera app. There are workarounds to it, but it's still not as convenient. Now the next must-have accessory is a tripod. I use the Freewell Real Travel Tripod. It folds down small, weighs under a kilo, and extends up to 1.5 meters. I can adjust the angle with the ball head, and it even has a hidden phone clip for the iPhone. It's a bit pricey at around $250, but the lightweight design and its functionality make it super useful and easy to bring along. For camera movement, since there's no stabilization available when filming in OpenGate ProRes RAW, I use the Insta360 Flow 2 Pro. It's foldable, easy to carry, and works well with my current setup. Now the Flow 2 Pro supports up to 300 grams, but if you plan on adding conversion lenses, a stronger gimbal like the Home iSteady M7 is the better choice. Now for the sequence, because I'm filming myself with the rear lens on the back, I can't really see myself while recording. Unfortunately, the Blackmagic camera app doesn't support Apple Watch monitoring yet. As an alternative, I've used the Gimbal CP5, which mirrors your iPhone screen with very low latency and up to 10 meters of reliable real-time transmission. And this makes it so much easier to frame yourself properly and get a balanced shot without running back and forth. So these are the essential pieces of gear I use to make the filmmaking process easier. With that covered, let's move on to filming with the iPhone 17 Pro Max. So for this first shot, I decided to give the viewer a sense of where the scene takes place. And my idea is to create a tilt upward shot. And I have my iPhone 17 Pro Max mounted on the Real Travel tripod from Freewell. I'm also using their V&D filter, and I also have the SSD Lexer connected because we're shooting in 4K OpenGate in Apple Log 2. I decided to film this in 30 frames per second, so this way I can slow it down later in post just a little bit to smoothen out the tilt movement. And I'm using the 100mm lens. This way it's more focused, and I can also add a little bit of foreground like these leaves that you see over here. I'm using the 180-degree shutter rule. ISO is set to 500. Now, in order for me to create that tilt shot, I'm gonna slowly loosen this part, which allows me to just slowly tilt up the camera like so. Now, before I start, I'm gonna set and lock the focus on this part right over here so that the focus doesn't shift while I tilt up the camera. So let's start. That's the shot. I also didn't stop the recording at the end right away because I want to add a title to this, which is Uetliberg. So this time I mounted the iPhone 17 Pro Max on the Flow 2 Pro. The setup works well, and I'm going to create a slide shot. I'm going to capture these trees using the ultra wide angle lens. I think this looks really great. I'm going to shoot this in 25 frames per second using the 13mm lens. Also, by using the ultra wide angle lens, I can emphasize more of that camera movement. Now, it still can be a little bit shaky, but I can easily add stabilization in post. So this is going to be a static shot where I'm going to film myself walking towards the camera. We're going to use the 24mm lens, and I'm recording this in 25 frames per second. So this way we get a real-time motion. And I'm just waiting so that there are actually no people. Just looks nicer if I'm just alone walking this path. So let's start it. So I now want to create a low shot, and for that I inverted the center column. This way I can also add some foreground to my shot, and I'm simply going to get a close-up shot of me walking. Now I've left the focus in auto. I've seen a couple of people walking and the focus seems to be fine. To me this looks good. Let's start recording. Oh yeah, this looks great. Now always make sure to double check your footage to make sure everything is in focus and there's nothing, distracting in the shot. Otherwise, you'll have to come back and reshoot it, which will take up a lot of time. I know we have a few shots already of me walking, but I want to make each shot as interesting as possible. This way we can piece them together to create a more engaging walking scene. And this time I'm gonna set and lock focus on this plant over here. So this way the background is out of focus and I'm out of focus as I come into frame. And the reason for that is because I want to add curiosity to the video. So we have a wide shot of me where I'm really far away, where you can't really tell who the character is. Then we have a close-up shot of me walking where you also can't tell who that person is, but it builds up curiosity. And then we have this shot where I'm out of focus. So it kind of builds up a bit. And then in one shot, I plan to reveal my face. And I'm filming this on the 24mm lens, 25 frames per second. I've set the ISO to 100. And other than that, this looks really good. I'm going to start recording and let's do this. For this shot, I revealed the tower by tilting the camera upward on the tripod. I first set the end position to check the horizon, composition, and exposure. Then I started with the camera angled down and slowly tilted it upward using both hands for a smooth movement. I recorded it at 30 frames per second so I could slow it down slightly in post, use the 100mm lens to get a closer shot of the tower. So we're going to create another static shot, but from a lower angle. And this time I'm going to walk into the frame, look around, and then walk off frame. And this is where the viewer gets to see the character's face. So I got a really nice composition. You can see some of the trees, and then we have this beautiful tower. And later when I walk into frame, it will focus from the tower to me, hopefully. Now, because I can't see myself, I'm using the Gimbal CP5. I can sort of frame myself and see where I will be standing. So I think this right here will look good. So welcome to the editing section of this video where I will be showing you how I've edited the Uetliberg scene inside Final Cut Pro. So let me first play back the video with the timeline. Now, I already edited the footage, but I'm going to quickly show you how to create a project when editing OpenGate footage. So I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to name it Uetliberg. And important, under video, I'm going to select custom, and the resolution would be 4224 by 3024. And I shot most of it in 25 frames per second, and everything else I leave how it is. Gonna select OK. So let's go through all of the clips. So I start off with this shot where I tilt up the camera and then slowly reveal the title. It's a good idea to think about your opening shot as well as where you want to place your title. And you can see I slowed down the camera movement at the end, which then nicely cuts to the second clip, which is an ultra wide shot of the trees with a slight camera movement. And then we move over to this static shot where I'm walking. You can also see the dog appearing. You can see we have that natural motion blur because I'm using the 180-degree shutter rule. And then in this next shot, you can see these leaves that really add depth to the video and focuses the viewer attention towards the center of the frame. And then this next clip, we have me out of focus while the plant is in focus, creating an interesting shot. And then moving on to the second last shot, tilting up the camera to reveal the tower. You can also see a nice focus shift from the plant to the tower. And then we have this last shot where I appear in the frame and then I look towards the tower, focus shifts, and as I walk away, it shifts back to me and then back to the tower. For this scene on the Uetliberg, I used music and sound effects from Motionary, which is my go-to platform for high-quality media assets and is the sponsor of today's video. One of the most important parts of editing is finding music that matches the tone of your video, and Motionary makes that really easy. You can filter by genre, mood, video theme, and more. For this project, I wanted something that captures the calm and beauty of nature on the Uetliberg. I chose a classical track and found the perfect song within seconds right at the top of the list. What's also great is that you can select similar tracks if you want more options. I also added small sound effects from Motion Ray to bring more life to the scene, things like nature, ambient sound, and footsteps, and combine them with some of my own recorded audio to make it sound even fuller. And this creates a more immersive experience for the viewer. Here's how it sounds with just the sound effects. Now, beyond music and sound effects, Motion Ray is a complete platform for video creators. It offers video templates, motion graphics, LUTs, stock footage, and even AI voiceovers. If you want to explore more, check out Motion Ray using the link in the video description below. You'll also get 2 extra months for free. With that said, let's move on. So let me show you how I color graded this clip. So this is the before and after. And I'm going to start off by showing you how you can access your ProRes RAW settings and also convert Apple Log into Rec 709. So this is the clip that we will be grading. Now at first it looks flat, and that is because we shot it in Apple Log 2. Now Final Cut Pro might convert this automatically. So in order to get this flat picture profile, you want to head over to the Information tab, choose instead of Basic, General. And then to access the ProRes RAW settings, scroll down and then you'll find Modify ProRes RAW settings, and under processing you can select iPhone ProRes RAW. Then you can adjust ISO as well as white balance. I usually leave it as shot because the iPhone does a really good job at detecting the white balance. More important is that you lock it once you start recording. Below under the RAW to log, you'll select Apple Log 2. Now there are 2 ways to convert the Apple Log 2 to Rec 709. The first method would be to head over to the camera LUT and then select Apple Log 2. Now, I don't prefer this method because this gives me less flexibility to color grade the image. I want to do the major changes before the conversion. So instead, I'm going to leave this at none. So instead, what I used is Cinematch, which is a plugin. You can see over here, I have the model and the profile. Now, it's not the correct model. Hopefully, they will update that in the future. But more importantly is that I can just convert it to Apple Log. Now, this is also not the Apple Log 2 version. I didn't find an official LUT for it, but Apple Log works too. I've converted it, so this way we get a normal looking image, and this allows me to make the global corrections over here, where I lifted the overall exposure as well as shadows and midtones, just to bring more detail back in the shadows. So the next thing is I've adjusted the exposure where I lowered the shadows and midtones a bit. I've added saturation. I've also added a vignette, which focuses the attention more towards me. Then I've adjusted the white balance, made it a little bit warmer. Then I've applied a color curve. This is the S curve to add more contrast and also lifted the shadows a bit. And then in the hue versus saturation, I've removed some of the green because it was overly saturated. And then I've added one of my custom LUTs to create the final look. And these are actually from my premium mobile LUTs. And there's also a Apple Log to Rec 709 conversion LUT included. Then I've applied a color mask to make the skies more blue. And then I've cleaned up some of the shadows so they don't look too blue, as well as the highlights. And this is what I applied. So in the Luma versus saturation, I dragged down both ends to clean those areas up a bit. And then for the final touch, I've added haze quite a lot to make the scene feel more dreamy. And this is a plugin from Film Convert. And then at last, I've added the M Film Look. I've added aberration, sort of distorts the corners. I've added lens blur, which helps again focus the attention towards me. And I've added film grain to blend in the colors better. And there you have it. That is the final look I've achieved. Now let me just quickly show you how I've graded this shot, because I'm filming towards the sky. So this is a very contrasty scene. You can see I'm super dark. So what I did is I've applied a magnetic color mask, which tracked me throughout the shot. And I've simply lifted the highlights to make myself brighter, which I think worked really well. Now, regarding the title I used, this is from Motion VFX called M Title Cinematic 2, which they have a bunch of different title templates to choose from. And I can simply drag it as an adjustment layer on top of the clip, and it will create the animation for me. When it comes to static shots, you can also apply a digital zoom to add a bit more camera movement to your video. So the constant zoom is also from Motion VFX, where it does a slow zoom in. And I've also applied it to this, and this shot. In order to export the video, head over up here, select Export File, head over to Settings, make sure to choose Computer. If you're planning to upload this on YouTube, MP4 is the right choice. And then simply hit Next and save it to your destination folder. Now, let's say you shot in OpenGate and want to repurpose your clip for YouTube, where 16:9 is sort of the standard format. Create a new project. Let's call it Uetliberg 16:9. Then select 4K. The resolution is 3840 by 2160 and frame rate is 25, and select OK. So I've now copy pasted the clips to this 16:9 project, and you can see we have these black bars at the left and right. So from here on, I can select all of the clips, and then in the inspector under spatial conform, I can set it to fill. So now you can see it fits the 16:9 format. And if you want to do adjustments, you can select the transform tool and then reframe however you like. So that is how I filmed and edited a cinematic video using the iPhone 17 Pro Max. I hope this breakdown gave you some inspiration for your own projects and showed you what's possible with just a phone and a few accessories. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a like, subscribe for more smartphone filmmaking tips, and let me know in the comments what you'd like me to cover next. If you want to keep learning, check out some of my other videos right here. They'll help you take your iPhone filmmaking to the next level. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, guys. Take care and see you in the next one.